Right, Rob, let's talk about a little bit more about your career and England and the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, which should really have been the highlight of your career, and perhaps it was, but it also became one of the most difficult...
It wasn't the worst, yes, go on.
It became one of the most difficult parts of your career as well, didn't it? So let's go back, first of all. You went there with David James and Joe Hart as well.
Yep.
Who was the number one in your mind when you went?
Numerically, literally, David James was. He had number one on his shirt. Now, whether that means anything, you look at it, and I read it and said, well, he's got the number one shirt. That's something. In truth, no one knew. It was a weird situation where I played a lot of the qualifiers and then had gotten sent off in the penultimate qualifier against the Ukraine. And they called Ben Foster in to play the last game at Wembley in the last qualifier, which was a dead rubber anyway because we'd already qualified. So it threw question marks in the air. We then went into the pre-tournament friendlies where I played my fair share. Thought I'd done well enough, but there was never anything concrete. There was never a nudge from the manager. There was never anything publicly. And it was something that played on your mind, not so much that you genuinely didn't know. You don't know how to prepare. You don't prepare the same. And it's not in your mind, and you'll know the same. If you know you're playing, you prepare the same way, or you have a set way of preparing, and you couldn't. I didn't. And that's something that, and you get phone calls every day from people. Are you going to play? Are you going to play? And this builds up over 6 weeks in a pre...
Rob, is that when you talk about a player as well, is it different from a goalkeeper though? Sort of psychologically, mentally? Because I think that position is so fragile in some ways. It just feels, even when I was at a club, you always needed to know who the number one was. So when you're talking about it, the same for a player, do you think there's more when it's a goalkeeper that you feel like you need to know?
I think the further you go up the pitch, the more turmoil there can be, and it be a productive thing. So if the closer you get to the goal, then unless someone's having a bad time, including centre-halves, including defenders, then you keep it as steady as you can, you keep them relationships, and you keep those partnerships, that understanding going. And the further you go up the pitch, if someone's having a worse time and they're an attacker, you can chop and change, you can switch it over more. I think for that goalkeeper centre-half partnership, no one knew who was playing. No one knew who was playing in the starting 11. So you couldn't build up those
I knew I wasn't.
Well, it's interesting you had a very different view on all of this. Did you have an idea who was going into that tournament as number one?
No one had a clue. We really didn't.
And what do you think the mentality of that is from Capello? He's looking for a good reaction. He's trying to keep everybody on his toes.
I mean, do you think it's fair to say there wasn't a standout keeper in terms of the three? Do you think that'd be a fair point why maybe there was that indecision from Capello? It wasn't like there was someone who was like a standout and far better than the others. I think yourself, David James, Joe Hart are all at that tournament, and people are not quite sure who the number was in terms of actually ability. There's no one a level or two above anyone else.
I think you're looking at it in terms of ability, then you're looking at someone like David James, had incredible ability. He was towards the end of his career and still was an athlete and was amazing. Joe Hart was, the thing against him was that he was young and he inexperienced. He'd had the season at Birmingham. I was in the middle, but probably the least gifted goalkeeper out of the three. So if you'd swapped it all around, you'd have probably had a clear number one, and you sat there as the three of them, and it didn't help in that regard. And in the build-up, you're talking about, there wasn't that consistency of selection.
Well, you did start the first game. When did you find out you were playing against America in the first game of the World Cup?
Same time as you, when he turned the flipboard over and named the team. That was, your brain goes into overdrive to do your preparation that probably would have been 2-3 days into an hour and a half, 2 hours. So that preparation changes entirely. So, yeah, it didn't help. It doesn't take away from the mistake that happened. But these are things in life that sent to test.
Talk us through that moment then. That this is the elephant in the room is the Clint Dempsey strike, which finds a way past you. When you look back at that moment, do you see a clear technical error on your part? Was there an interesting bounce that found its way past you? What was it for you?
I think it was something that I changed over a long period of time, that to go away from the old traditional long barrier pickup on like a cricket fielder and to go with more of a straight-legged, and you can adjust your hands more. You can go left, you can go right, you can do different things, you can come up, come down. Once you go down into that scoop, it's a very difficult one to come out of. Once I'd gone down, and I remember it now, it hit a small part of my hand up here rather than my hand down there, and that's the difference of it staying out and going in. And so those technically, I think at the time, was the right thing to do. Things have moved on, and people are doing things in different ways now.
You knew straight away you'd made a big error in goal for England, and the world pretty much is watching that. How difficult were the next few minutes, the next hour, to get through that game mentally?
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, I'd made mistakes previous in my career, and you work around it. And then this one happened to be in front of about 2 or 3 billion people. But it's I think what you do is you go into a process of which you do is you say, right, okay, there's my mistake, a glaring error. You're going to do 1 or 2 of them a season. That's it as a goalkeeper. That's why you're in the Premier League. That's why you're an international goalkeeper. It's going to be another 6 months. Make sure it's another 6 months. Deal with it now. Don't make another glaring error in the next half hour, because there's only one thing worse, and that's making 2.
Well, can I come in on that point? Because you saved me that game. I came on sub at half time. I think Ledley King came off, and goalkeepers are slightly different from defenders, but defenders normally, if you make a mistake, you need your keeper to save you. There's no one there for a keeper to save him. And I made a big mistake in that second half, and you saved me. You made a great save. I think you pushed one onto the post from out the door. I got too tight, got turned. So you're talking about, how I reacted in the game. We all make mistakes in the game. I think you judge players and characters how they react in that game. So the way you reacted second half basically told me a lot about you. And basically you saved my bacon there. So it was you on all the back pages and not me. But I just wanted to ask you, and this is a thing with playing with England. You can feel like the whole world's against you. If you make a big mistake like that in a big game like that, you can imagine every back page, maybe some of the front pages, the whole country's watching. How is that to deal with you, but also your family? Because I think sometimes we forget that. How would the effect on negativity? I'm not sure, there was no social media though, maybe it was just starting, but the press. How tough was it for you, but also how tough was that for your family?
Well, you're still at a tournament. You're still in that bubble, and you kind of have a few sort of winces from the press officers and the press team and that sort of stuff after the game, and you have messages on your phone. But beyond that, you're just sat in a hotel room feeling bad about a game that went wrong for yourself. At home, my parents would go out for a walk, and then you get back to your house and there's 20, 30 people from the press there waiting for you, and you got people waiting outside my own flat, which was empty. Bit weird, but it's kind of they knew I was at a World Cup. Why wait outside my flat? So it was tough for them. I think that's what my friends and other people that I knew were sort of just thinking, why are people turning up at my office wanting to interview me when I'm turning up at work for the day and stuff like that? So it goes too far at some point, but because you're in this bubble, you don't know what's going on at home. You don't know what's happening. One big difference that was made was half-time and after the game, David Beckham was part of the coaching staff and came up to me and sat with me and said, "You all right?" I said, "Yeah, good, okay." And he didn't have to say much, but I thought, I tell you what, if someone who's been through it and come out the other side, and someone like that can do that, then I'll be all right. And I took great comfort from that at the time.
Did the manager speak to you?
Only before the next game to tell me I wasn't playing.
Did he do that individually, or was that in a group scenario?
No, he pulled me individually, and he had an entourage behind him as well. So it was about 6 of them and 1 of me. So I didn't really have much room to argue. Yeah.
And how did that make you feel?
He turned to me and said, "It's too big a mistake." And I said, "Well, that's too big a mistake for you. I feel okay. I want to play." He said, "Well, you're not." And that was that. And I was disappointed. I think you work all your life towards something, and sometimes it doesn't work out how you want it to. That's the life of being a goalkeeper at times.
Has that helped you empathise with other players? You've had an interesting time since then. You did get more England experience after that, but being that number 3 role at Chelsea, where perhaps you wouldn't play much football, but you'd be around the squad, that empathy that you might have for others. And I think it's something that you've talked about moving forward potentially as well.
Yeah, I think that you go through a lot as an individual, as a player, and you go through a lot on your own. And you don't have that element to really be proactive and ask for help. And I think that that's something that needs to be improved within football. You have psychologists, but they're tied to football clubs. And you look at it, and in a lot of the time, on a personal level, players can't reach out for help. And sometimes you need that individual to be broached, and it's someone to come up and say, "Are you okay?" And on a completely independent basis. And I think that that's something that's huge within the game that will get bigger and bigger. Something that I'd want to be a part of, and yet to find a way to do that on the most productive level that we can.
You did have another England experience. How important was it that wasn't the end in South Africa?
I think my last game for England was keeping a clean sheet against Norway, and that's the one I'll take with me. That you turn around and say you're only as good as your last game. Kept a clean sheet. Thank you very much. But no, I was grateful to Roy Hodgson for getting a game, just to put that one behind me, to get another game, and also to go to another major tournament was great. It was one where I thought, in contrast to where we were at South Africa, to go forward with a balanced group, with a well-knit group, with a group that knew where they were and were comfortable where they were, and a group of lads that just wanted to go out and play well. For a manager who kept the pressure off, it was even though I wasn't playing, really enjoyable and refreshing experience.